All right.
All right, then we will call this meeting of the Public Works Committee to order at 6:30 PM. We have a quorum, so we can do business. Our first item is the minutes of January 24th.
This is Robert Burke. I would make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I will. This is Gayatri here.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion with respect to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed nay. The ayes have it, and the January 24th minutes are approved.
All right. So let me scroll up. Our next item on the agenda here is Middleton Beach Road reconstruction to set the date of another public hearing. And largely just because you'll remember at the last meeting when we had our public hearing, we had inadvertently omitted notification to one of the affected property owners. And so they now have a choice of either having a separate public hearing or waiving their right to a public hearing. And we had heard that they would waive their right, but we have not seen that in writing. So this is just to set ourselves up to have a public hearing should that be necessary. If we get a waiver in the meantime, we can just skip this agenda item.
Sure. How much time do we need? It says here March 14th. That's 2 meetings from now, correct?
Yeah, so by statute, we have to provide the property owner with between 10 and 40 days notice from the hearing date. So this gets us to more on the minimal end of that notice, but
Okay.
they've already got notice to verbally. We'll just get it in writing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I believe March 14th works fine for me.
Fine for me as well.
Should we just make a motion to approve that,
Yes.
Sean? Is that what you need?
Yes, a
To
motion
set,
to
yeah,
have a
March
public hearing
14th.
date for March 14th at 6:30 PM.
Oh,
Let's
I'm
get
sorry.
the motion.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Jenny.
Well, I just didn't know if pushing this out, does this impact anything that the construction contractor is planning for?
It doesn't. These are 2 separate processes that we normally try to keep together, but now they're a little bit fragmented, but the construction contract has been awarded.
So it doesn't impact his planning at all?
No,
Okay,
no, it doesn't.
thank you.
All right, so we have a motion. I think we still need a second for Carrie's motion.
And I'm sorry, Bob, did you,
Second,
I'm sorry, Bob, did you make that motion?
Oh, Carrie did.
Carrie
did.
did. Okay,
And Susan seconded it.
okay.
All right, any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will have another public hearing on March 14th, unless those folks get in touch with us in writing beforehand. Correct, Sean?
Right, exactly. If they waive the right to it, we'll skip it.
Okay.
So then we've got next up, Bell Farm, some discussion for the preliminary road design, and we have a preliminary road design, so that's good news. I see that we have the developer, Kathleen, is with us tonight. I don't see Kathleen if Bruce is here. Oh, there I see Bruce.
Here I am.
Never mind. I was scanning the list and missed you, Bruce.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, you're coming through just fine. So you all have seen the drawings and you've seen my memo. I don't know if you want me to jump to anything. I have a few recommendations embedded in here. And we could talk about the roads one at a time. And if there are any general questions, that would be fine too.
All right, well, I think, Sean, do you want to maybe summarize what the design is with respect to Bellefontaine first, and then we'll do Sarah and B second, and then talk about the other
Sure.
question that you had raised as well.
Sure. And I'm just trying to figure out, maybe I'll just stay here on this overview for a bit, even though it'd be nice to maybe be able to see it better. Let me try zooming in just a bit. Okay, well, you can see, if nothing else, on your screens by this dashed purple line, that's the multi-use path that would be on the south edge of proposed Bellefontaine Boulevard. Susan, were you asking a question about this green line before
Yes.
the meeting started? Okay, so
Yes.
that's the sanitary sewer interceptor that cuts through the site.
Okay, and then it links up with one in Misty Valley?
It's already there. Mhm.
Okay, it's
So this
already,
is just the easement.
okay. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, okay. So the road design, maybe going down to a typical section for that would be a good way to start, if nothing else. Trust that's showing up on your screens okay?
Yes,
Okay, so the proposal is, and we'll skip the 80-foot right of way. That's just the short block between Parmenter Street and Serenby or Serenby. Serenby. Okay, I'll keep saying that wrong, but keep correcting me.
That's okay.
Serenby to Parmenter would be a 4-lane section, or as proposed as a 4-lane section with no parking. Most of what I think we should probably focus our time on is this, what's labeled as a 70-foot right of way, which has 2 driving lanes and 2 parking lanes. Okay, and then a sidewalk on the north side and a multi-use path on the south side, if that makes sense. And I had a number of recommendations. You can't see the note off the edge of the screen here, but one of my recommendations was to make these 11-foot lanes, still keeping it within a 70-foot right of way. Another one of, and that was mostly to allow a little bit more lateral clearance, just recognizing that this isn't a straight street. It's a pretty curvy and somewhat hilly street. So to give a little bit more lateral leeway for this, to go with 11-foot lanes instead of 10s. Another of my recommendations was to broaden the curbs, both horizontal and vertical. And shift the vertical curves so that they align with or oppose the horizontal curves. You've seen curves sometimes where you're just sort of cresting a hill and all of a sudden you feel like, oh, I have to turn left or turn right. And I think we can modify this subtly to make that more apparent, that you'll know when you're on a curve.
This is Robert. If those 10 feet width roadways go to 11, where's the extra foot on each side, or 2 feet total
It would have to come out of the grass.
to the
So,
terrace?
yeah, so instead of
Okay.
being 8 and 9, it would be, 7 and 8 or 7.5 even, whatever.
Sure. Okay.
I think that would be fine.
My question is, I mean, in your memo, you say that the standard for a neighborhood collector street is 80 foot. Why are we doing 70?
So there's the ordinance, 80 foot, and then there are 2 levels of planning documents that we have, and it confuses me too. We have an ordinance, and that's quite a bit older than what the city adopted for typical road sections. And so the city's ordinance still refers to this older 80-foot right of way. So let me zoom in on this piece now.
So Sean, this would be more like the retail area in Middleton Hills. In terms of,
I didn't, I didn't look at that, to be honest with you. So this is the 80-foot you're talking about, Carl, for a collector standard. And
Right.
it has this 40-foot width from face of curb to face of curb, or 36 feet of asphalt plus 2 feet plus 2 feet of the gutter itself. That roadway standard was also, that's adopted in ordinance, but the council also adopted typical street cross sections, which are different than the ordinance. I don't know which controls, to be honest with you, but I think it's reasonable for what we're trying to do to say we can get 2 travel lanes and 2 parking lanes and a sidewalk and a bike path in 70 feet. If we want bike lanes on the street, we're going to need to add 10 feet to that, and then we'd be back up to 80 feet. This old standard in our ordinance really was based on 12-foot lanes, not 10s or 11s. And those extra feet make a difference.
Okay. What is the Misty Valley right away?
That's 125.
Oh, okay.
And we've only built the north half of what's supposed to be a median divided road.
Yeah. Okay.
But we're unlikely
I
to
was
build.
just concerned that it would at least be as wide as the Misty Valley. So, I mean, or it would have a match. Misty Valley would, if it was 80, we should make it 80, but I don't have an issue with that.
Well, the actual street width is 37 feet face to face of the travel, the street itself.
In Misty Valley?
In Misty Valley, yeah.
Yeah, but there's only one of the 2 streets that were planned built, so.
Right.
Yeah. But we're also thinking about not building the second one.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Mhm.
So I guess to Susan's point, could I just ask a question? I mean, we are to the point where we have to know that this is going to be 2-lane versus a future 4-lane because of our platting and all of that. So that I think I have to establish that tonight if possible. I mean, I know we've been waiting on things and all of that, but so that's number one. Number two, the only thing that I would just say is, to go from 10 to 11, I totally understand that there are all these forces that have to be balanced. I'll just, from the standpoint that, the extra width of both Bellefontaine and ultimately Serenbe, which I know we'll talk about in a minute, we're adding impervious. We're taking away from grass and we're adding impervious. We're adding cost to construct, cost to maintain, the amount of salt that needs to be put down, which ultimately also affects the environment. And I know we're going to be talking about the curves in a little bit, but the more that we widen and straighten out the road, the greater the speeds are going to be. And so these are the things that go through my mind, not just as a developer, but like as a person, as a person who cares about the environment, as a person who cares about the place, the sense of place where we live. As I see what's happening on West Washington Avenue and the city of Madison scrambling to figure out traffic calming because of all the record deaths that have occurred. I've got I know there are things that have to be weighed here, but these are the things that come to my mind. And I just hope that you'll hear those things and consider those things. I think they're critically important. And I know it's when you say, oh, let's just add another 2 feet of width or 10 feet of width to Serenbe. I know it's not hippy dippy that we're adding it. There's reasons we're adding it, but I also wonder if we were in a room with water resource management, what they would say, because again, they're trying to create more soil and grass to be able to drink. So those are the things that are on my mind related to this stuff. And I know there's got to be give and take. And I totally respect.
Can I step in here? I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. And this area is now in my district. I live in Middleton Hills. And so I really like the narrow streets coming, Frank Lloyd Wright coming in. with 2 lanes that aren't real wide and the parking on each side, simply because it slows the people down. And I think in a residential area, that's really critical. So I like hearing that. And I will say Water Resources is real concerned about this development and the water going into Graver Pond. So again,
Well,
less,
yeah,
impervious surface is better.
Yeah, I agree with you, Susan and Kathleen. So my question is, why are we moving it to 11 feet?
I'm proposing it at 11 feet largely because when we get bigger wheelbase vehicles coming through here, again, this is not Frank Lloyd Wright within a neighborhood. Other neighborhoods will be driving through here to get to Parmenter Street. So I'm trying to figure not just that this road serves this neighborhood, but that this road serves this region, right? So we're gonna have moving vans coming through here. We hope to have buses coming through here. And
That's
as they're negotiating curbs between parked cars, there's more opportunity for them to off track and cross the center line on curbs, especially pronounced curbs. And I'm trying to give them just a little bit of forgiveness room so that when there's an.
Oh, sorry, Sean.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just wondering, is that documented somewhere that that's a concern of like within like city planning? Just because, I mean, there's so many cities that have narrow streets that have buses going down them and bigger vehicles. I'm really concerned about the speeds of the streets too. And is it better? I don't know. I'm just asking the question, like, will they not fit? Like it.
I think in theory they can fit, right? I mean, again, we're coming from a background of having 12-foot lanes and trying to say, let's go with 11-foot lanes, right? 10 is the narrowest lane we have, and it's really built for residential streets, not collector streets. So
And this is a very curvy, hilly layout of this road as well. I mean,
and that's the thing. So we don't have collector streets that are this hilly and curvy for me to kind of point at and say, oh, it'd be like this. Because the kind of street that this is more like High Road, where several neighborhoods are trying to use it, not just one neighborhood. But
Okay.
High Road's not hilly and curvy. It's got some hills.
Sean, on High Road, I would say when you put in the parking lanes and the bike lanes, the traffic slowed down. It was a big improvement in terms of traffic speed. I don't have a problem with the 11 feet, but I wouldn't want to go to 12.
I'm not proposing that either because, as Kathleen rightly pointed out, we're trying to reach a balance here on some of this stuff and say, let's recognize it for what it is, but let's also walk away from where we had been with historic design and try something a little bit more in keeping with our goal of narrowing roads. Again, the ordinance is a little bit outdated compared to the council approved cross sections. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to make this work like a collector street and yet allow it to be hilly and curvy within some bounds and still usable so that, people aren't worried about driving on it.
Sean, could you show that cross section of the collector street that's kind of at odds with the ordinance?
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Right, so this is saying what the council also approved, in addition to saying that this should be 80 feet and that between faces of curb should be 40 feet. We have a different road that says, well, between faces of curb really could be 36 feet instead of 40 feet, and it could fit into a 66-foot right-of-way instead of an 80-foot right-of-way. And that's where I'm trying to reach the balance of saying, I don't disagree with that stuff, but if we're going to introduce a lot of curves and going up and down, we probably should give a little more lateral clearance to something like the travel lanes, because this is intended to be a residential collector. We're trying to build something that's a little bit more of a regional collector among multiple neighborhoods. We don't have a different cross-section for that. We just have this one thing called collector.
So Sean, I think that said by 2050, an estimate of 4,000 vehicles per day, the MPO. Is that right? Was I reading that right? So this says typically 1 to 10,000 VPD?
I think that that's right, based on some assumptions that they made, that they were in that ballpark, and I'm trying to find it now.
Yeah, I'm looking at the MPO memo, and it says 4,500.
Yeah,
And they refer to it as a 2-lane urban local road with a 26 mile per hour free flow speed.
mhm.
So,
So this is more than, say, the Collector Street Donna Drive, which also serves several neighborhoods, has about 3,000 vehicles a day on it. If you're familiar with that.
Mhm.
This
What
would have,
about Old Middleton? What's that vehicle?
I
You
think
know,
that's lower. I think that's lower, but I don't have a number in mind about that.
Okay.
So Sean, why does that cross section of the Collector Street show up to 10,000 vehicles per day?
I don't know. The Plan Commission really picked most of this stuff.
John, was there any consideration to putting bike lanes in here as well? Because we definitely have a kind of a predilection toward putting bike lanes on all new streets. And this one, the additional right-of-way and a little bit of additional size in terms of the 11-foot lanes rather than 10-foot might allow for bike lanes as well, might it not?
Well, we would normally, if we're going to stripe a bike lane, leave 5 feet for it. In this case, if we also want parking, we'd probably put the bike lane, between parking and the travel lane, kind of like what we did on Parmenter Street or on High Road. But I haven't heard a committee, the Public Works Committee or the Plan Commission, advocate for bike lanes to be painted on this road. And I think our master plan, our comprehensive plan, says that on future collector and arterial roads will favor bike lanes. On this one, I think the recognition was that this should tie into what we've already built through Misty Valley as a half section of road, basically, and that will reallocate space between those curb lines, in which case we're not going to get bike lanes through what's existing Misty Valley, short of completely rebuilding it.
And one of the reasons we put in that multi-use path was for that purpose as well.
Right. So I don't think there's going to be bikes there, but I am concerned. I've driven a lot of roads recently that have cars parked on both sides, and you're kind of wending your way through, and those are straightaways. I think because of the curvy nature here, I would feel more comfortable going with the 11-foot width for the main driving roadway width. Just straightaways are very different than having to negotiate around parked cars and take curves up and down, side to side. I think we need just a little added space, and I think the 11-foot width is a nice compromise, personally.
I agree.
So do I.
I do too.
All right.
So on this road, part of what I was recommending also is to soften the degree of curbs, both horizontal and the vertical, the hills, the valleys, to smooth things out a little, to keep them, but not make them quite this pronounced. And for that, I did go back to the city ordinance for a 450-foot. This is the plan view, turning right and turning left kind of curve. For the hills and valleys, I went to a different source and said, curve should be so and so pronounced if you're putting in a hill or a valley. And I think many of these already meet those standards. 1 and maybe 2 could use some massaging for that standard. So I don't know if the,
Bruce, do you want to comment on that?
And which one should we be referring to, Sean? The
450 foot for horizontal curves.
Mhm.
That's in our ordinance. That's the standard I went to for my recommendation on that.
Yeah. And so I don't know if, so on the, what we were using, or what I was using when I set this up, and we made the assumption that this was going to be a local street with the intent of slowing traffic down, and trying to give it some character in the neighborhood as you come into if you're coming from Misty Valley, coming into the commercial area. And the 450 feet, I remember laying a couple of those Senate blows out early on, and it really restricted us to, it almost becomes more of a, what it does is it because it's straightening it out a little bit, you're then encouraging you're encouraging the speeds a little bit more, a little bit higher speeds, and it kind of takes away the character of the neighborhood. Now we know there's an area, I don't know if, can you bring the plan, the overall development sheet up?
Yeah, let me get back to that.
Yeah, so that curve that's right underneath the word future,
Here.
kind of in the middle there, yeah. Now that, to me, that's a little smaller curve, and I think going to flattening that out and to the 450, 500 or whatever, to pull that down, I think that makes gives you a nice transition from where you're coming off of Bellefontaine and heading east. It starts, you're as you drive that with the flatter radius curve, I agree, that's probably that will feel a little better as you're transitioning in going east. But then but the other ones to the east of that, where I have the red lines crossing right there, and then the further east, next one further east, those are around 2 to 250 for the center line radius. And again, that's coming out of the residential neighborhood, and with the goal to try to slow some traffic down as you're coming from the east, heading in towards the commercial and higher density areas.
Well, but again, I understand the viewpoint that we want to build a local road, but I think we need to recognize that we're building a road that needs to serve this neighborhood and Misty Valley and the Acre Farm and future development even east of there.
Mhm.
And they all want to get to Perminer Street.
I think we've got a real opportunity here to be proactive with the traffic calming instead of what Madison's doing, scrambling after the fact, and they can't because of the way the infrastructure and the buildings are. I mean, just today, the New York Times headline, pedestrian deaths spike in US as reckless driving surges. I mean, headline after headline talks about this, and it's like, this is an opportunity right when we're first building it to put those measures in beforehand, and instead of scrambling afterward.
But you also have,
We need to keep remembering that this is going to handle 4,500 cars a day.
right.
It's not a local road.
Can I ask you this, Bruce, on these smaller degree of curvature, horizontal curves, what's the difference between 250 and 450? How much does that slide that in? Did you look at that?
Yeah, I did. But
Refeed in, or?
it all depends how much we can, So in the instance with these 200-foot curves, there's a requirement to have a 100-foot tangent section between the start of one curve and the end of another.
Okay.
If we use a 450-foot curve and we can ignore that, and we could just go from one to the next, there's a lot more. It doesn't straighten it out as much. When I'm trying to maintain a certain tangent section in addition to the wider, longer sweeping curves, that's when it kind of stretches out and becomes more of a straight street, as opposed to a little bit more character in it.
Sure, but how far in did that come? Was it do you remember? I mean, like 3 feet or?
I don't know if you can allow me to share my screen, but I've got an instance of where that 450-foot curve.
That's a good question. Let me stop sharing this and try.
While you're bringing that up, what is the speed limit going to be on this?
I think it'll probably be posted at 25, for which we normally design it to be reasonably safe at 30. So that when we post it at 25, there's a little forgiveness built in.
And so what is the concern about the curves at that speed? It seems like it seems like it would be okay.
I think it could be navigable. Again, I think what we're trying to do is avoid making young drivers, old drivers, big wheelbase drivers kind of oversteer, where they're constantly feel like, I just got done turning left, now I have to make a sharp right, and now another left, and now another right. And when you get into that slalom mentality, you start focusing on that, but then you can't focus on car doors and people crossing the street and whatever else is going on, because you're thinking about, am I able to stay in my lane?
But you're actually focused on driving then.
There is that,
Yeah.
right?
You know what I mean? You're
But
focused on the task
vision
at
gets,
hand.
yeah,
And you're
but
gonna
your
slow
vision
down.
gets to be exclusive of things off to the side when you're doing that, because you're focused on your lane. So it's good, but it's also bad.
It also slows
technically-
people down.
I feel like, but that is a traffic calming measure, right? And that's why the developers are putting this in. So I guess I don't know. I feel like it'd be great to reference some kind of reports,
Yeah.
studies.
Old Middleton Road doesn't have any curves on it. It's got a hill. I drive it 3 or 4 times a day. There are no big speeding issues on that road. I'm not sure that these curves are really that important, frankly. If you drive Whitney Way at 5 o'clock on any day of the week, north of Mineral Point Road, there's curves on that road and people are going 50, 60 miles an hour. And they lowered the speed limit last summer to 25 miles an hour, and it has not made one bit of difference.
What road is that?
Because there is no enforcement.
Carl, what
So
road is that?
I think the curve issue to me is I'm pessimistic about the curves really being that important. I think it's a lot of the 2-lane road is going to help because you're going to get slower traffic slowing down the speeders. That's a big help.
And you've got to accommodate larger vehicles. There's commercial.
You've got to accommodate larger vehicles.
You're going to have delivery trucks. You're going to have semis on that road. They're with all the residential. They're going to be moving vans. You've got large scale fire apparatus. I mean, the road's got to accommodate those things as well as aesthetics.
Carl, what road were you referring to about the curves?
Whitney Way, he said, I think, north of.
Whitney Way, north of Mineral Point Road. Driving from the Research Park over to University Avenue. It's a racetrack. Biggest problem, the curves don't slow anything down. It's a 4-lane road, which is a problem.
Can you share numbers?
Sure. I tried to, but it was disabled. But I did email you the PDF. If you have access to your email, you can pop that up.
I do. I'll just have to wait a second here. All right,
I
so let
think-
me.
I was gonna say
reshare.
one more comment. I think it would be great though if we could refer to studies rather than just kind of like antidotes, because I think, time of day, I don't know, it's just everyone has a different experience because, and I agree with you, Carl. I know what you're saying. I just know that I've biked on Old Middleton Road and with my family, and it seemed very dangerous because of the higher speeds, people passing. So I think it's just, everyone's experience is different.
Yeah, and that's why, Carrie, I mean, everybody has their own opinion, right? And
Right.
that's why I went to the ordinance as my source and said, here's why my recommendation is based on this number as opposed to any other number. That doesn't mean the city can't come up with something that's different than the ordinance. And I'm absolutely open to that, but this is where I'm starting and why I'm starting with that recommendation. So Bruce, you have this laid out in gray as a 450-foot radius.
Yeah.
As
Yeah,
opposed
so
to a 250.
right. So that's a 37-foot wide street of pavement, 37 feet. So just to give you an idea, that's now a 450-foot curve, and you can see the differential there of what that does.
Mhm.
Now, if you head a little bit east, you'll see I've got some 250 and 200-foot and 252-foot radiuses there. So
Mhm.
you can kind of see the little straight tangent sections between the curves. That was done to meet the ordinance. Now, if by going with this larger radiuses, we eliminate some of those tangent straight sections, it just flattens the curves out a little bit. And we can accommodate that. But that's it. Again, it's one of those things where we kind of lose some of the character, and the flattening the curves tends to, I think, increase the likelihood of traffic moving faster through there.
I think this would still have a lot of character. It would be by far, I think, still our curviest road per mile.
Mhm. Now, I guess that would be one of my questions is do we eliminate that tangent section between curves and just allow them to go reverse back to back? I mean, reverse points. Because I noticed
I could see cheating down on it a little, but I think going with reverse curves would be bad too. Because I mean, as soon as you get done turning right, you're turning left. And I think, especially with inexperienced drivers, that's going to be a problem. That's going to be a sore spot.
Well, but I think the point of it being 450 is to allow for that maneuver to be sweeping and not so abrupt.
Mhm.
This is Robert. I tend to agree with Bruce on this. That, I mean, no matter what's happening, I don't care. I mean, I can't tell exactly where the curve ends and a very short straightaway starts before it reverses direction, but you're going to have hands on the wheel on this one, and you're going to be turning left, turning right, turning left, turning right, no matter what we do. So I'm not as concerned about dwindlingly small straightaways between these curves. The one that seemed the tightest, and it was probably the least tight for all I know, but is the one that Bruce has shown in this image as 450. It did seem like that you were driving a little bit too much, and yeah, that one right there. It seemed like you were driving just a little bit too much into those buildings to the north of the road on the tighter turn, and with a little bit more of a graceful turn, this shallow turn, I don't know how to describe it there. I like that one a little bit better, but I'm not, it's funny, the ones that are marked 200 and 252 don't bother me as much as that one that was now marked 450 with the gray. I feel like some of those sharper turns other places are less problematic than the one big turn. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm just giving my thoughts out loud to let other people state their ideas or tell me I'm wrong, but I feel like some of those other curves don't bother me as much as that big one that's currently marked 450.
Yeah, I think these are less pronounced because they're a lower degree of curve. You're not turning as far.
Right.
Whereas
Yeah.
this is going through a bigger angle.
So that's personally, I would be okay with getting rid of the straightaways in between bends, or at least, shortening them. I don't know what the requirement is. If it's 10 feet and you knock it down to 1 or 2 feet, straight away before you go into the next turn the other direction. I don't know that I see it as a problem. I would personally think that one big bend that's listed as 450 probably should be more like the 450 that's shown in gray, rather than what was there before with the really sharp bend that seems like it takes the bike path and everything, so it wends it so far north there that it just feels like you're running the risk of, you don't make that turn, you're driving your car into
A building.
buildings or obviously more parked cars if there's parked cars there. So
I have a question. What types of houses are there? Just so I can get a feel for how many cars might be parked. And do they have garages themselves?
Yeah, so all of those are all townhomes along there, and they're all accessed from the roads behind the houses. They have garages behind them. And
Okay.
nobody has a driveway onto Bellefontaine.
So that helps tremendously, because unless they have guests, there are not going to be as many cars parked there, hopefully.
Or if they're just running errands, they might, park out front,
Yeah,
run in, run
right.
out, go
But
again.
it's not like the Middleton Hills retail area that's always parked cars on both sides.
right.
Yeah, and I think
You
especially,
recommended that all of the curves have the 450-foot radius. Is that correct?
And to allow shortening the tangent section between curves, I'm hearing.
Did you have any kind of a drawing that showed what that would look like here? How would that change the configuration of the road?
I don't know that we have a great drawing until I get to the plan and profile. And even then, you kind of have to know what you're looking for, right? So one curve ends and 100 feet later, the next curve begins. What Bruce is saying is, by flattening these curves, this point, starts to move out a little bit. This point starts to move over a little bit, and you might have 50 feet between curves. To put more length into the curve, you have to take length out of what's not the curve, if that makes
So
sense.
you have a gentler curve.
You do have a gentler curve, you just have a shorter distance between the curves.
Yeah,
And-
I was
and
kind
the
of
only
agreeing
other-
with what Robert was saying. Sorry, go ahead. Jim.
Yeah, I was going to say the only other way to balance that is to turn these lines a little bit. So instead of being at this orientation, if it got rotated clockwise so that this point picked up and this point went down, then you can fit a broader curve in too, because the line you're tangent from is a little bit more in line with the curve you're about to enter. So, there's a different way to balance that, but shortening the tangent is the easy way to balance it, and then twisting that line would fine tune it maybe.
Sean, as opposed to what you're saying, are you guys comfortable with what the drawing that Bruce actually put up? Like if we fix that one, the big 451, and then do you feel strongly about those other ones having to be 450 or leaving them as they are and then keeping the straightaways longer? I mean, would you be willing or open to passing this as it is?
I
Does it
would.
achieve what you're trying to do?
I agree with Robert. I would, if like how Robert was saying, if that gray area is where that 450 is how it kind of drops down.
John, what do you think?
I would, well, again, I'm trying to follow the ordinance as best I can and the guidance that the city council has given. I would prefer to see what it would look like with 450s, even if we have to shorten the tangent.
How can we ignore the ordinance?
I think the city
Just a
council would
guideline,
have
I
to.
mean, right?
Well,
The committee can recommend to the council a waiver of the ordinance for whatever reason that the committee wants.
What would the reason be here? I mean, you have a blank sheet of paper. You could draw this roadway any way you want to draw this roadway, and it would be easy enough to draw it in conformity with the ordinance.
I think because we're trying to do something different, right? Like, I think we're trying to make this road, put in some traffic calming features, address some of the stormwater issues that we're talking about. We're trying to make this different. So I think that's where we would make exceptions.
I would also, point to the comprehensive plan as well as like all the goals that you guys have in the comprehensive plan regarding narrower streets and
Right.
regarding traffic calming measures. So it's not like this is coming out of the blue. I mean, I took your comprehensive plan as like a Bible when we were looking at this. I mean, I was so impressed and inspired by it. And so
The plan had this road 4-lane all the way through, did it not?
That's not what the comprehensive plan had. I would say also, we're being asked to meet with Bike Ped because on streets like Elmwood and Hubbard, we're having lots of accidents where kids are getting hit, where it's a wide road that's straight. So we need to, the traffic calming I see is really important.
But you're not, Susan, I'm sorry, but you're not going to legislate or design roads that'll keep kids from running out into the street between parked cars.
no, that's true, but
That's true, but
there is something called Vision Zero, and there's all sorts of studies that show it's amazing how much you can control what people do if you go into your design process looking at what people would naturally tend to do. When you don't put a crosswalk in a place where everybody's going to be crossing the street, you know what happens? They cross the street where they're going to cross the street anyway. So what you do is you're designing roads to slow down traffic. You're designing roads to, kind of meet people where they are, as opposed to assuming that everybody follows a rule. And I see what Kathleen's trying to do here, and I'm supportive of it. I am, you could hear I'm pushing them a little bit too, to say, can we meet them halfway? Can they meet us halfway? And I think that's where the city is going, even if this requires us to ask for something a little different than what the ordinances currently say. I see us as a city trying to embrace Vision Zero.
I would like to see what the road would look like with the 450-foot curves, but I don't know that I'm
I
comfortable.
agree.
What we have here now.
Sure. I mean, I think what Kathleen absolutely needs today is kind of a commitment that this is going to stay a 2-lane road. And I think we're going to be able to offer her that.
I don't see that that's a problem, but I don't think
Right.
it has to be a road race course.
I think there might be, sure, we might be able to ask, maybe not, maybe not a high detailed map, but something that shows overlaid on this what a 450 curve, 450-foot radius curve looks like in some of these other areas. And, you know, assuming that you don't have to have 100 feet straightaways in between them, that might not change the way the road moves much at all, except at this one big bend. You know, I think there obviously going to 450 really smooth that out. I think in the other areas you won't see much of a difference. It'll just, as Sean stated, the curves will just smooth out a little bit.
And I think, you know, if you have to twist the tangent sections a little bit, Bruce, it should be fine tuning, you know, that would come out in the wash. But if you have to shorten up tangents to 50 feet, I think I'm hearing mostly committee support for that.
Yeah.
Instead of 100.
And how do we want to proceed on this question this evening? Because we should move on here too.
Are there any other questions, Bruce, with what I had marked up and offered as staff recommendations besides these horizontal curves and the lane widths?
Well, the what's going to help me out, I think, on the vertical curvature, the K values felt a little excessive because of the speed itself, and typically at the low points, well, the high points and low points, the 40 foot, or I'm sorry, the K value of 40, you know, that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, in addition to the horizontal curves, the vertical curves are trying to utilize the terrain as best as we can with minimal disturbance, and these K values, you know, kind of we're fighting against that a little bit, because we're then flattening hills and valleys when I'm trying to match the terrain as best I can without you know, cutting things too much out there or filling things a lot. Because generally the K values are related to sight distance, and you know, at these 25-mile-an-hour speeds, or design speed of 30, you know, I think, you know, I think 30 feet, the K value of 30, and sometimes even 20 at the sags, you know, we've done that in local streets, which are typically the 25-mile-an-hour ones. So that's my only other thing regarding the Bellefontaine recommendations that you had.
Yeah, did you have a different source for K values? I was looking at AASHTO's design guidance and the WISDOT FDM, but I
was just
didn't
going
know
based
of
on
other design guidance.
No, mine was just based on other communities that I've worked in, like, you know, Madison, Mount Horeb, Oregon, DeForest, you know, just some of their guidelines that they use.
Could you send those to me?
Sure.
Because I don't think we have any published standards. We've just been using, you know, the other published standards. But if you send those to me, I'd take a look at them.
Sure.
I thought that's what AASHTO and WISDOT did, was looked at stopping sight distance. I mean, they have a different one for passing sight distance, but that's not applicable here.
Right. Right. And I guess the only other thing with this being what's hard is the MPO talks about you know, we're designing this as a 38-foot wide street, which is kind of a mix between the collector and the local. So
right,
so,
and that's where I'm looking at, well, what is it trying to do?
right, and
not where is it, but what's it serving?
So I guess, and then my only other thing then related to the vertical portion of it, vertical curve portion, would be the 6% max for the grade. And again, that goes back to me trying to, work with the freight I'm dealing with out there. And, I think I have one instance where I'm 6.65%, and I'd like, just over 6. And so if there's a little bit of leeway there, I'd be looking for that too. But
Yeah, I don't know what the committee thinks about that. I think the balance is right, how much you're working with natural topography and how much we're trying to figure out long-term, how do we best make this usable for pedestrians who may have mobility issues. So 6 is obviously a number pulled out of the air. It's 6.65. Maybe that's doable. 5 would be better. So I don't know that there's a right answer for that. It's a little bit, this is a number that we published in our ordinance that says nothing works quite right all the time, right? Parmenter is obviously way beyond 6% as hills go, but it's also harder for some people to use because of it. So does the committee care if that stays 6.5, 6.65?
I don't, if it's, I think, I wouldn't try to have it everywhere, 6 up and 6 down and 6.65. But if it's just, in a little area where it goes a little over that 6, it's still less than the 8% for local. And it sounds like we're kind of straddling those two things anyway. So a little over 6%, I think, is fine, but I don't, where we can flatten things down a little bit, great. But I feel like a little bit going over that 6% limit, which is an arbitrary number, is acceptable.
Well, the ordinance is there for some reason, I presume, and I'm not all that comfortable just saying that we should ignore the ordinances. If the council wants to redo the ordinance and put some more flexibility in for those things, that's their right to do. But they have given us these guidelines to work with, and I'm not too comfortable just ignoring them because we've got a piece of topography that doesn't fit the ordinance.
Sean, when were the ordinances written or approved by council?
I don't know.
Because I don't remember any time since I've been on council dealing with that issue, which makes it over 14 years in terms of our current desire now to get more traffic calming.
Right.
Well, this isn't a traffic calming thing, though. This is a working with the topography thing.
Yeah. But what I'm suggesting is maybe these need to be looked at and updated with some of our current goals in terms of dealing with traffic, because I know the opinion has changed in that time period.
Right.
Well,
In the
that's fine, but I
meantime,
don't think
ADA said 5% is really our target maximum.
Okay,
But the
yeah,
city ordinance
okay.
still says 6% is.
But I don't necessarily think that's our responsibility to do. If the council wants to undertake that, they certainly can undertake that.
I would agree with you on that, except it's never been brought to council for us to even think about it. So I think we need to maybe have them think about it with what we're trying to do in terms of the kinds of neighborhoods and so on.
That's fine, but I mean, I don't know that you're going to get those ordinances rewritten in time to have much meaningful impact on this particular project.
No, you're right. We need to make a decision on this project today.
Yeah.
So I think we each know where we probably stand on it, and just have to have a vote and see what our recommendation is to council.
All right, I think that's a good idea. Robert, do you have a motion you wish to offer?
Well, because we broke this up, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to even make my motion. Are we just talking about vertical K values right now? Are we talking about the entire project?
Everything that had to do with Bellefontaine Drive. And then we'll do Serenby Street after that.
Is there, I would say, if we could work in the right-of-way width, and I'm recommending 70 feet, the design is recommending 70 feet. I doubt if that's controversial.
Right. I would, let's take this, one step at a time. My motion would encompass a 70-foot right of way, but it would also encompass
Would that
11
include 11-foot lanes,
11-foot lanes for the two
Okay.
driveways.
8-foot parking lanes, one on each side,
Correct.
450 radius curve, 450-foot radius curves. And we talked about narrow or shortening the runout
Yes.
tangent length from 100 to 50.
Yes.
We also talked about them just seeing what that would look like first and then voting on that. So could we pull that out of the motion or not? Sorry, but
Well,
I
I
don't know.
think it would have to come back to the committee when we're looking at it. So if we're trying to give design guidance,
Yeah, I think so too, is if we see something come back to us, we can tweak it, 2 weeks from now or whenever. But I want to give at least a fairly clear direction on this motion. So
Okay.
yes,
Yeah,
I
this
would
is
say the
preliminary design too, remember, correct?
sure.
Mhm.
I would, part of my motion is the 450.
with a shortening of
With
acceptable
the
tangent.
shortening, yes, they can shorten up that 100 feet straightaways to a lower amount. I don't know what the right number there is.
Okay, I would suggest 50 is a workable, reasonable amount. And beyond that, I think you can twist those entry and exit angles a little bit.
Okay, then I'll make that part of my
Do you have
motion as
a
well.
different number in mind, Bruce, as a minimum tangent length?
Well, again, I mean, if you're gonna be maneuvering the curves, whether it's 50 feet or 25 feet, I don't think there's much of a difference. But so I mean, from my perspective, to get the better feel, a shorter length, the better. But
Well, 50 is pretty short. That's 2 car lengths.
right. So well, again, we'll look at it with 50 and see how it looks.
Okay, let's
Right.
do that. And then do we need to talk about vertical?
These vertical curves, I don't have design guidance other than what national standards are. Well,
I guess
and
right
national.
now, my motion would allow, try to target 6% or less most places, but if they have one location that's up to 6.65%, my motion would allow for that as well.
Okay, and anything about the vertical curves? I didn't hear in your motion if you have guidance to suggest about following the national standards as I'm recommending, or some other standards that Bruce is going to provide.
I don't understand those standards, what Bruce has or what you have well enough to put it into my motion. So either help me put something into my motion or.
Oh, okay.
We just
And I
talked
can-
about 6% grade and 6.65%. And are either of those tied in with the curvature you're talking about, or is that completely different?
They are a little bit connected to each other. So there's the length of curve,
Sure.
whether we're fitting it into, 150 feet or 20 feet, right? How fast are we sweeping this change of grade?
Yep.
So here, for instance, we're going at 1%, and then we're going to come out of a curve at 6.65%. And in between, over that 150 feet, we're going to change grade by 5.65%. Or maybe this is -1, I'm not sure. Whatever. Let's say this is going uphill at 1 and this is going uphill at 6.65. So we're changing the algebraic difference of 5.65% grade. And when we do it over 150 feet, when you divide those numbers, it should come out to 20.61. So it's just a mathematical expression that says how fast are we changing grade in how big a distance, right? And so the bigger number that this K value is, means basically this is a flatter curve or spread out over a longer distance. Does that make sense?
It does.
So if this were a K of 10, it would be a pretty short curve,
right.
as opposed to sort of a long sweeping curve.
I guess for right now, I'll go with the values that you say are standard in the area, Sean, but I would welcome feedback from the developer to say that's not the only way to do this.
Me too. Yeah, I'm open to that. This is all I could find.
Sure.
Okay.
So I have direction. I've given direction on the widths of the right of way and the widths of the road and the horizontal curves and the vertical curves. What else do we need for this motion?
Aligning horizontal and vertical curves is a recommendation I would make regardless.
Okay, I'll add that to the motion as well. And I have no idea how this motion is going to read.
We'll all be surprised tomorrow. That's what the tape is for.
I think I understand the elements of it. The next question would be, is there a second to the motion?
This is Carl. I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion with respect to the motion? Does everybody understand it?
I think so. I just wanted to, so this drawing will come back to us. We'll look at this again, correct?
Yes.
Yes, this is a preliminary, the whole thing is preliminary here. We'll look at this probably several times more before it's finalized.
Okay, thanks.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we can proceed on that part of the equation anyway. And now we should move on to the other street.
And I want to just confirm, but I am no longer seeing Gayatri. Dina
She left
Karan.
earlier.
Okay, so I'm not recording her as voting on this.
Okay.
But I heard unanimity of the other 5 members, so we've not lost a quorum. That's good news. So the other one is Serenby Street, and so the cross section here. This is the road that goes mostly north-south parallel to Parmenter Street. Is proposing 2 parking lanes, and this is two-way traffic that just shares a lane. But if there's, if it's not parked full of cars, it's not just 12 feet, it's sort of, in the ballpark of 20 feet, or I guess you wouldn't drive in the gutter ordinarily. So, 18 feet in which you can sort of pass each other. And that's not consistent with the ordinance, but again, it is consistent with one of the city standards that the city adopted. I think what I was noticing though is that the city standard doesn't have 5-foot terraces. It actually fits this road cross section into a 60-foot right of way in the city standards, the typical details for this.
You have a copy of that typical detail?
I don't remember if I copied it back into this memo or not. Oops.
So the last time we were in front of Public Works,
Here it is.
we talked about Serenby and that 28-foot wide cross section right here. Our goal was to maintain a 50-foot wide right of way as shown in that original one, which initially was to have a 28-foot wide street, but then have those narrower terrace areas or those green areas. And as we went through the discussion, we were like, okay, in that narrow of a corridor, we did, I recall the consensus was let's try to maintain the additional green space, and utilizing the 20-foot wide street with parking with a 12 and the 8 for a 20-foot wide street, and then just have parking on one side, or parking on neither side up towards that intersection. So we proceeded to draw our line work and cross sections for Serenbe with a 50-foot right of way with a 20-foot wide street to maintain the green space for the tree growth.
So you want parking just on one side?
We want, yeah, what we're requesting is a 20-foot wide street with parking on one side.
Okay, so I misunderstood your cross-section in the plans then, that showed parking on both sides,
Well,
where you have 8 foot and 8 foot and 12 foot, but you don't want a 28-foot road and a 50-foot right of way. You want a 20-foot road in a 50-foot right of way. Like this 8
Right, and
feet
that
goes away and becomes grass.
yeah, so this cross section was presented prior, at the last public works meeting we were at. And as we discussed the street, we're like, okay, the consensus from the committee was, well, we'd rather have the green space to allow for proper tree growth, and give up some of the street width or the hardscape and the street width, and then just allow parking on one side. So this was kind of a carryover that I brought forward, but what we're proposing is a 20-foot wide street, within the 50-foot right of way.
And I'm gonna, if I could just jump on for a second too, to make sure everybody's clear as to how we're looking at Serenbe Street. So we've worked really hard to make sure like the multi-family traffic doesn't come onto Serenbe Street. They have their other access points to pull into the development and then pull right into their underground parking with just a couple of just a couple of exceptions. And in terms of like, again, all the housing has their parking, that line Serenbe Street has their parking in their garages behind them. So there's none of that as well. So again, we've really worked through like the flow of a lot of things in terms of, we don't see this as being like a big thoroughfare. We've specifically designed to avoid that.
Yeah, and I think this committee was reasonably supportive of that. I just misunderstood that this graphic was showing parking on both sides, and that wouldn't work for what we were trying to do. But if you want parking on one side, the city has a standard for a 20-foot wide street in a 50-foot right of way with parking on one side. It suggests that it's applicable to land uses adjacent to it that have a density of less than 4 per acre, which I don't think we do. But I think you could make a case to the Plan Commission, who would weigh in on something like that, this would be sort of a minor access because you've got other street access and internal access, and maybe wouldn't have any particular use for on-street parking on Serenbe. I think a case could be made for that.
This has a terrace design of 5 feet wide. Didn't we talk about that's not current policy?
Yes,
Right.
but this is not the right cross section, it turns out. What Bruce has just said is that this 8 feet of blacktop would go away and get converted to grass to widen these terraces.
Okay,
You have 9 feet on each side instead of 5.
okay, all right.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we
All
talked
right,
about
didn't
last
understand
time. That's what we talked about last time, that this all came before us, and I still agree that should be acceptable. So yeah, this is the wrong cross section to show here, but as long as we make it very clear that what we are approving is a 20-foot wide street cross section on a 50-foot wide right of way, and with parking on only one side, my motion would be to approve this construction of Serenbe.
And the other thing that I've continued to recommend is that the dead end of a public street should have a turnaround.
I agree.
cul-de-sac.
So I have a question about that. I totally understand that we will need a cul-de-sac there. If I think the question had come up, and I've made some outreach regarding this about the possibility of Springton becoming public if both are, so we own half of the road, and Tuba Uba owns half of the road, and we give each other easements. And so if both of us gave our portion to the city for public, and again, I don't know yet, I've reached out to them, I'm trying to work through, or I'm trying to like understand if they're even interested in that. But if Springton became a public road, would that be able to, would we be able to avoid the cul-de-sac? And if it doesn't become a public road, then of course we know we have to have the cul-de-sac. But I'm just curious about that. Like, what is the committee think, or Sean, what do you think?
I think the city would be open to that. In lieu of this just being sort of a private shared driveway to just becoming an extension of what we're willing to accept as a public street. Why not bring it out to a public street?
Yeah.
And we have an intersection with Parmenter Street there?
It would, yeah.
And there currently is one, right? It's currently
Yeah,
an
It's a
intersection.
driveway, yeah, right across from Springton.
Right, Springton Court.
So this goes to where the like Play in Wisconsin and well, what's that big electronics firm back in there?
National
National
Electrostatics.
Electrostatics is back there. Yeah, yeah. This is their driveway. So yeah, no, that could be a street, I think.
So Sean, I'll work on that. And if we can't make progress on that, then we will show that as a cul-de-sac at the end.
Okay.
So that, I started to make a motion on Serenbe, and I would, about the 20-foot road width, 50-foot right of way, parking on one side. And then I'll add to that, to put in a cul-de-sac at the end there. And that's obviously subject to change if things change about Springton Drive or whatever it's called.
Cool.
I would second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion with respect to the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will proceed accordingly.
The only other recommendation I made was just to recognize we don't have the TIA. In fact, the TIA is not started yet. I'm expecting that to show up in terms of a proposal. And that's why I'm hoping that by reaching a balance on these things, that won't offer any surprises to us. But we always say, well, it's all subject to recommendations, or at least satisfying recommendations in the TIA. And I understand we want to get started on this in terms of getting the design going and hopefully even done with preliminary, maybe as a foot race with the TIA. I think the more we agree on these things, the less likely it is that the TIA would offer some shell. But I do want to, throw that back out there just so everybody hears it. Whether or not the committee wants to reaffirm that in a motion or just let it ride from a previous motion doesn't matter to me.
I think it would be a good idea to reaffirm it so that we're
I agree.
current minutes and so forth.
I agree. I'd make a motion that this is all subject to, we're giving direction, but this is all subject to approval of a TIA, I guess.
But yeah, the TIA may recommend changes to what we have recommended.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to, I probably phrased that wrong, but the TIA may offer new information that requires this to change a bit. Hopefully not much. But
I think.
yeah,
Okay.
TIA,
and-
so whatever that motion is.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
It's
Sorry.
Carl, I'll second it.
Thank you.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion with respect to the TIA? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, I think that resolves the Bell Farm issues for the moment.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank
you.
you. Have a great night. Happy
Thank you.
Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Hey, Sean, real quick before I go, in general, any sense how once the go-ahead's given for the TIA, what the turnaround is on those?
I don't, they normally write it right in there, and I haven't seen their proposal yet, but it's usually 2 or 3 months on something like that
Oh, okay,
of this size.
okay.
Fortunately, there are only 2 public streets here, so there's not a lot to be analyzed.
Yeah,
That'll
okay,
make it quicker.
okay,
Thank you.
Mhm.
all right.
All right,
Thank
thank you.
Okay,
right.
so next up is a proposal for parking changes along part of Deming Way, right in Greenway Station. And I see that Roxanne and Steve are both here tonight, so you can unmute yourselves. I have a brief memo and the concept drawing that Roxanne had provided. I added these pictures, so if it starts to look really busy, that's my fault, not hers. But I just wanted to give a superimposed Google view, if you will, of what that little piece of road currently looks like right now compared to what it would be proposed to look like, because it's a little hard sometimes to see the gray lines in the background, but they're there. So the proposal is, you can see there are here and there just a few parallel parking spots in little notches on Deming Way. This is that central fountain area where seasonally it gets decorated by the mall manager. And there are crosswalks and benches and that sort of thing around. You kind of see it sort of heavily landscaped between the parking spots. And the idea being to convert some of that so that it's, the way I measured this is 45-degree angle parking on the street instead. And I had counted up that it's proposing 43 stalls. There are existing 13 stalls. So there would be a net gain of 30 stalls with this proposal. The right-of-way line is shown as a thin black line in here, and the proposed curb would go from right-of-way to right-of-way. In essence. And then you can see pretty clearly where the existing business driveways are to their back parking, both north and south of where this proposal is.
This is Robert. I'll just, what, did you say that this would entail some type of need to change something underground as well?
Well, there's storm sewer. You see these red dots here and there. So those are storm sewer inlets.
Sure.
They'd have to move. I mean, they're not going to be in the middle of a parking spot. And I think street lighting and conductors would also have to be relocated, but we're not at that stage of design just yet. I think this
Who
would
would
be
eventually pay for that type of work?
that would all be part of this road reconstruction. I think we're looking at a fair amount of work. One of my other thoughts was, if we want to do this, we have a fair amount of pavement width in here. Let me zoom in a bit so you can read the dimension there. Roxanne provided, but it's, oops, sorry if that just made you dizzy. 48 feet for effectively two-way traffic, right? So these are really wide travel lanes. And there may be, I mean, obviously when we're approaching, when we're approaching these driveways, we want to get a 3-lane section in here. So we have a little bit of a striped left turn lane out of the through traffic. So while we want that to be 3 lanes, over here, it really could be 2 lanes. And there may be an opportunity to redo the geometry and pull some of this angle parking away from the sidewalk if it gets to design. This is just a concept right now.
So Sean, the city would be paying for this reconstruction?
I don't think the city would pay for this. I think
Okay.
that the developer or whomever who's requesting it would end up paying for it.
Okay, so if they're paying for it, it's not a big issue for the city.
Well, I'm not saying that.
Well, I mean, in terms of cost.
Oh, for the cost of it, I would not.
Yes.
I would not see that. I doubt if the city would be supportive of that.
Yeah,
No.
that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Sean,
Sean,
was
this
it
is
scheduled to
Steve.
be? Oh, sorry, just one question. Was this scheduled to be, under maintenance in any kind? Is that why this is coming up? Or is it just because of the parking issue?
Yeah, I'll let Steve address that.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Steve Dorn. I'm with Galway Companies, and we were brought in to take over basically turning, management leasing and trying to turn this property around in November of last year. And one of the things that about 50% of those inline buildings along Deming Way are vacant right now. And so over the last year, we've interviewed past tenants, prospective tenants, tenants that we are trying very hardly to get, retail tenants that we are trying very hardly to get into the building. And over resoundingly, the biggest concern we get from tenants is, Steve, there's parking there, but it's not in front of the storefront. So you then need to figure out a way to turn those storefronts around to face the parking, or get parking in front of the storefronts, because we're not going to lease space in a shopping center where there's 13 parking stalls to be shared among all those tenants, when in the middle of the winter, people don't want to walk, that far. So we're just, we're willing to pay for it. We are wanting to reinvest in Greenway Station and make sure that it stays a thriving retail center. We have tenants that are interested in being in the shopping center if we can figure out the parking situation. We've floated this concept by a few retailers that we're talking to, and have been able to save interest and save deals that were dying on the vine. And so, again, we're not saying there's not adequate parking in the whole shopping center as a whole. It's just, it's not accessible for these retail spaces. So, if you kind of look at what Hilldale's done, which is our largest competitor when we're trying to land a retail tenant, they've done a very nice job of creating 45-degree angled parking in front of the storefronts. And it works well. It's tight. Parking is tight over there, but it works well. And we're essentially looking to do something similar to that, where we still create, and maintain this streetscape corridor along Deming Way, but just take out some of the width of the street and create some more diagonal parking to make it easier for consumers to get into the retailers and easier to sell the shopping center to potential retailers.
Sean, I have a couple of questions. Who maintains that part of Deming Way in terms of snow removal and things of that nature? Is that done by the city, or is that done by the landscape company that the shopping center contracts with?
As far as I know, it's all done by the city. We had initially, and this is going back 20 years to its origin, had discussions that Red Development, which used to manage this, I think maybe, and also own it, would take care of that, but they never signed that agreement. So as far as I know, we've been doing it this whole time.
Yeah, it's a public road. Our understanding was that the city does maintain the road and the parking along the road. Now we do, the ownership group does maintain the fountain and all the landscaping in the roundabout.
Right. But I
Yeah,
mean,
we had
that,
reached a license agreement on that going, I don't know, 5 years ago-ish.
well, if you make the roadway narrower to accommodate the parking, and then you have the issue of people backing out kind of blind into the more narrow roadway with all of the distractions that there are right there for drivers in terms of the centerpiece with the fountain and the Christmas tree and the pumpkin tree and all the rest of that, plus all of the storefronts, it just seems to me that that creates a little bit of a safety problem. You can't, if you're angle parked like that, backing out of that with all the pedestrians that are around and all of the distractions that drivers have, just seemed to me to create a rather unsafe situation.
Sean, there's other situations in Middleton, I believe, where there's angled parking like this. Have there been other issues with those angled parking stalls? Because I believe there's a few downtown where
Yeah.
they're in front of retail storefronts as well.
On Elmwood Avenue, it's a very different setup than this. On Elmwood Avenue, we have some angle parking on the section between, say, North High Point Road and Cayuga, maybe just a little bit east of Cayuga. There's a couple on the north side of that road. I think what's really different is we don't have as much pedestrian activity like we have at the Central Island. We don't have visual points of interest like we do right in this area. We don't have really fairly large parking lots in close proximity. So I think if someone's trying to back out of this spot with a crosswalk and with driveways entering the traffic stream, this driver has a lot to pay attention to, but can't pay attention to it because they can't see it all.
I spend a lot of time at Hilldale. In fact, we were just there tonight. And it, although clumsy, it doesn't seem to be an issue. I have not seen any issues with the way Hilldale did it. And frankly, Steve, Hilldale is not in an angle, which I think would be better. Yeah. It is absolutely perpendicular to the building fronts.
Yep, you're correct. Yep.
Which makes it more clumsy. I don't see an issue. I don't see that Hilldale had an issue at all, and they have a lot more traffic, I think, than what you're going to see here.
The other place that Middleton has some angled parking is on Hubbard Street between Parmenter and then where it curves around to run into Elmwood. And that, I don't know what the accident situation there is, if any, but that is just jammed up quite frequently because of the fact that when somebody's backing out of there, it's a one-way street. When somebody's backing out of there, people wait for somebody to back out and it plugs up the street all the way down to Parmenter Street.
But if you're backing into a parallel stall, you have the same issue.
Well, that, I guess people would sit and wait for somebody to get out of a parallel stall, but the person getting out of a parallel stall, I think, has a much better field of vision than somebody backing out at an angle or backing out.
No, I'm talking about backing into a parallel stall.
Yeah, they at least start by occupying the travel lane. You know, I mean, they're stopped, so everyone behind them is stopped. This is actually trying to pull into what could be some other person thinking, oh, great, I finally got a gap and I'm just gonna swing left and start going. But they probably won't see that this car has also just decided to back up, and vice versa. I don't think they'll see each other. I'm not saying they'll crash into each other, I just expect more surprises, and maybe that'll just help people slow down. But it's a lot.
I think the other thing that's going to help us a lot here over the existing traffic flows is that by putting these stalls in, we are narrowing Deming Way a little bit, which in turn is going to slow that traffic down.
This is Roxanne. I'll just say, I did not narrow Deming Way, but I think it's a great idea. I mean, I'm looking at Hilldale, and they have a 26-foot wide drive aisle with perpendicular parking, and I'm showing a 54. I mean, I have like a huge area between the parking stalls on each side. And in fact, if we narrow it up, you know, those inlets and stuff, I might be able to just keep a lot of the infrastructure. So it would save a lot of money too. I think it's a good idea.
Right, maybe. I
One
think
thing,
at these approaches, I think you'd still need 3 lanes, but that doesn't mean it has to be
Sean,
50.
I see what you're saying too. And, you know, maybe we have to look, you know, at some of the stalls movements, you know, near the intersections and, you know, look at that more closely. This was, you know, Steve's trying to get as many stalls as he can because he's trying to lease these, you know, Steve, well, yeah. So I tried to get what I thought was a reasonable amount without and still keep some decent views and angles, but do you know what I mean? So I don't know.
yeah, one thing I just wanted to comment that this is, although it's similar to Hilldale, it's a little different in that Deming Way is connecting, you know, to Greenway, Greenway Boulevard.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like the Hilldale is just connecting the parking lot to like the other, I don't know, it's slightly different. So just kind of keep that in mind in terms of like, I do have some concerns about the pedestrians and backing up and things like that.
Hilldale is not.
What was that, Bob?
I say Hilldale, the perpendicular parking at Hilldale is not on a through street. It's all internal of the shopping center. This is a street.
Exactly.
Frankly, I've driven both of these a lot, and Hilldale's got a lot more traffic than this does. A
Yes.
lot more.
I agree.
The other thing here is there is a bypass around going through down Deming, going on the backside of the Hilton Garden Inn. So it's, you know, if people are really trying to race through here, they don't have to go through Deming to get out towards Greenway Boulevard. There's 2 ways.
Kind of a roundabout way, but I understand what you said.
I was kind of looking at Elmwood and I just looked at the distance there. Looks to be about like 34 feet. Again, I'm at 54 feet.
Yeah, I think we only left 16 feet in there for sort of vehicle/bike use, you know, on each side. So I could see, 32 or 34, something like that. Right. And again, I think this is very different than Elmwood Avenue. But if the committee supports it, I was just suggesting this should at least go to the Plan Commission because it's going to change the character of what they originally envisioned with the development to focus really on this being sort of an outdoor walkable mall and give a little more priority from the sidewalk to vehicle parking instead. And I don't know, other than rough feel, what this might mean in terms of safety on this road with backing and pulling in with so much other visual stuff going on. So the committee might want to think about getting the opinion of a professional traffic operations engineer.
Probably a good idea, Sean.
Yeah, this is Robert. I want to be supportive of, you know, the businesses in Greenway Station. I think this is worth pursuing and worth sending to the Plan Commission. Not thrilled with the idea of trying to narrow down the main path, which I know has been mentioned, the main roadway, because when you got, it's two-way roads and you got people backing up from both sides, and I can even see if, you know, I'm backing out from the I'll call it the south side. I don't know if it's actually south. I'm backing out from the south parking spot, and somebody else is backing out of the north parking spot, and we're both going into a traffic lane.
A narrow
I
roadway.
could even see us hitting each other, even if there's no other cars around, let alone. So I would not recommend narrowing that 48 or 54, depending how you want to measure it, width of the road, Deming Way. But I do think there could be a path forward to putting in angled parking here.
Well, how would you like to proceed, committee? Do you want to refer this to the plan commission?
I'd
I
say
think we
yes.
should.
All right.
With our recommendation that they positively consider the angle parking.
Well, if
You could
that's
say
what
we
you want
support the
to do.
concept.
Mhm.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that we refer it to the plan committee with a recommendation that the angle parking concept be considered.
Can I ask a question, Carl, of your motion, that this all assumes that this is going to be developer finance? All of the changes that need to be made in the roadway, the storm sewer system, if any, all of that stuff is going to be developer financed. Is that?
Absolutely.
That's what your understanding of the motion is?
Right.
I think maybe we ought to state that in the motion as well.
All right. I agree to add that to the motion.
And one other question, I know, Sean, you had mentioned maybe that we'd need to consult with a traffic engineer. Is that something that the plan commission would do, or is that something that we would need to recommend?
I think it feels to me more like a public works committee thing than a plan commission thing. So I think if you'd recommend that separately or even in the same motion, doesn't really matter, but that would be something, Steve, then the city would look for funding for that study or analysis anyway. Study's probably too fancy a word.
Why don't we split that out into its own separate
Yeah.
recommendation?
Well, you could do that, or you could just add it to Carl's motion as one other contingency that.
It just seems cleaner to run it separate, but
Okay, any way you want to do it.
you're
Kind
the
of agree,
chairperson.
Robert, just because the one's going to the plan commission and this wouldn't necessarily affect the
Yeah,
plan
and
commission very much.
if for one, I'd rather not add it to my motion.
Okay,
I'm not concerned.
all right.
Okay.
Well, we have then Carl's motion. Did somebody second Carl's motion?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and that motion is carried. Now, did somebody want to make a motion with respect to the traffic analysis?
Maybe Carrie?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about it because Sean, you said that, so the funds for this study would be then coming from the developer. Is that
Yes.
right?
That's a typical part, like a TIA, except this would just be a roadway analysis of the changed conditions.
I wonder if it would make sense to wait to see what the planning commission says.
That'd be fine.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. I guess I just thought it was worthwhile to have the planning commission understand that Public Works is also thinking about this as part of the package, if in fact this goes forward, is that there be a traffic analysis done. I don't know that the public or the plan commission will come to that conclusion on its own, but maybe they will.
Or you could say, you know, if also supported by the plan commission, then the Public Works Committee recommends this. So it's at least conditional.
Yeah, yeah, I like that idea. And then it is sending a message, like you said, Bob, just to say like, we are thinking about this.
Yes.
So I'll go ahead and make that motion.
This is Robert. I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay.
Nay,
All right, the ayes have it. Carl can be recorded as a no vote, and we will send that information to the plan commission as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, have a good night.
You too.
So we don't have a lot left. Testing service agreements are up again. This is an annual thing where we just engage generally 3 area soils exploration / material testing companies, so that when we get to construction of roadway projects, we have someone to call to make sure the concrete's right and the asphalt is right and the base course is actually compacted well.
Yeah, so we've done this before. This is Robert. I'd recommend that the motion to recommend to the Finance Committee and Common Council approval of annual testing service agreements with these 3 companies.
Is there a second to Robert's motion?
I'll second the motion.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Under discussion, Sean, I would just ask, it indicates all firms have local offices and have done work for the city in the past. I assume the work that they have done for the city in the past has been satisfactory?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
All right,
I have one question, Sean. There are a lot of these line items that are significantly different in price.
yeah,
How do you select which one of the 3 companies gets hired for any particular project, or is it who's ever available kind of thing?
It's a little of both. We normally have Sean Ulsrud, so each project manager talks to Sean Ulsrud because we do, to the degree we can, want to spread things out a little bit. But so we try to figure out what's the major emphasis of any given project so that he can say, you know what, let's hire Gestra for that one, or let's hire CGC for that one.
Okay,
And so that at least we can spread it around, and yet as best we can, we're trying to keep an eye on cost too.
all right.
further discussion. Hearing none, those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we're sending this to we just do this as a committee, or does this go to the
Finance and Common
Finance
Council.
Council? Okay.
Yep.
So that'll be our recommendation of the Finance Committee and the Common Council.
Great. So the last thing on our agenda is, and this came up sort of as I was putting together the agenda, Wisconsin DNR reached out to us and says, we'd be willing to work with you to start getting some testing on your water supply sources for PFAS, which we've been talking about for years. And Dave mentioned it. In fact, it's about to be one of our requirements anyhow for testing coming up pretty soon. So this might be an opportune time, if nothing else, to get started with DNR. But Dave and I wanted to bring it to the committee, being the Water Utility Board, for advice on that and direction.
Yeah,
It'd
absolutely.
be
I
hard
think.
to turn down.
Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
I just said it seems like it would be hard to turn down.
Yeah.
Something
Right.
we wanted to do anyway, and the DNR is going to do it for free.
Is there anybody in this community that's using that?
That's using
The
DNR?
PFS?
Oh, I think
Oh.
it's legacy stuff for the most part that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So
And
all
it is
sorts of,
showing up in Wells and West Madison.
yeah.
It's
Not
yeah,
that
it's worth
far here.
it's worth checking. Hopefully, we'll find that we don't have a problem in our community, but
Yeah.
Without checking, we don't know.
Do they
And we
use
get
it?
questions.
Did they use it out at the airport?
No,
No,
they do not. But, you know, it is like when you get your wall-to-wall carpeting and it's got the stain resistant stuff on it, that's, you know, that's a Teflon product that is a PFAS. When
Water resistant jackets or.
right. So
Yeah.
there's just things that we even have in our homes that potentially can get out into nature, right? Into our community.
Mhm.
So I don't think there's any one industry that I'm aware of that would have, you know, be putting PFAS into our community, but it's just the natural accumulation from lots of little sources could be the concern more than anything. So
and
it's
we
a good
don't know
question.
where groundwater's going, because like I say, a lot of the wells in Madison going into the west part of Madison
Sure.
are contaminated.
So
with
hopefully the answer is no, but
Yeah.
it's worth checking and then probably ongoing in the future, checking it every few years or every year, whatever,
Yeah.
just see what's changing over time. But I'm fully supportive of starting this process on a voluntary basis now, whereas I think eventually it's probably not going to be voluntary. It's going to be just one of the standard things that has to be checked.
And
But
I
for right
think-
now, it sounds like this is more of our choice to pursue this
Right.
program, and I would recommend that we do so.
I
No,
think
I'm
too.
fully in agreement. I just was curious.
Sure.
Yeah. I think part of what DNR is trying to figure out is what's out there, because there is no regulatory standard yet. So I
Right.
think they're trying to do these two things at once. They're trying to say, well, what's out there and what should the regulatory standard be?
Makes sense.
You know,
Right.
so part of our downside as staff, of course, is going to be, well, once we have this number and throw it out there and say, we have 3, somebody's going to say, well, is that good or bad? And we'll say,
Right.
I don't know. But
Well,
it's 3.
hopefully DNR doesn't use what's out there to establish the standard.
That would be
Wow.
ideal.
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
we'll find out. But
So,
so
I have
I
a
would make, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Susan.
I have asked, because I've gotten requests from people about PFAS in our drinking water. And I thought David said we had been testing it, but we still need to keep testing it. But have we done some tests on it?
I think we do have some numbers for some constituents. I think this gets a little bit broader.
Yeah. No, we definitely need to do this. I'm just trying to get some background history.
Yeah.
So I would make a motion that we direct staff to pursue this voluntary sampling process for PFAS to be funded by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources.
I will second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and we will proceed along those lines.
I'd make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a
I'll
second?
I'll second that. No.
I think Terry wins this one.
A motion and a second. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. And before we formally adjourn, I'm just going to say I couldn't have spent Valentine's Day with a finer group of people. And thank you all for your attention and work this evening.
Thank you as well. Happy Valentine's Day.
And I'm
Happy
just going to remind
Valentine's
you,
Day.
Sean, I will not be here on the 28th. So you can
Okay.
tell Don accordingly that may speed or slow down his recovery. I'm not sure.
How about it?
And I also will not be here on the 28th.
Ooh,
That's okay. We'll
Okay.
soldier on. You guys go
Okay.
have fun.
the rest of us have to be here though.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
All right,
too.
good night
Bye.
all.
Yep,
Good
bye,
night.
everyone.
Thank you.